This presentation will be. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Welcome to the presentation, and good evening to you. What you're going to see is I want to give a little brief about our history, just so you can understand what we've done. We've done these procedures in thousands and thousands and thousands of different areas in well over 1,500 different spend areas across the globe on every continent. And I've been involved in this space for over 30 years. And so I'll give a little history about who we are, our experience, our success, and some of our partnerships. Who Above the Standard is, we've been around about 38 years, and we specialize in procurement. And procurement really is anything where money is spent. So when you go into an organization, that means human capital, that means logistics, IT, technology, raw materials, goods, services, anything in those categories where there's a bottom line impact. And that's not just reducing costs, it's increasing best value along the way. So it's really important as we go through this presentation and as you take notes and as you determine your strategy, your cost reduction strategy, because more and more companies across the board are about to reduce costs like they've never reduced costs before, just because of the global situation and what's about to happen. So as you look through your strategy and as you look at this information, this is a high-level overview. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go along with this that are holistic in measure. So when we do something from the standpoint, and we recommend you do the same thing from a holistic strategy. It isn't just about reducing that cost. It's about best value from every area that impacts that bottom line, and even the growth and the ROI and the efficiencies that go with that. So we provide, from a procurement standpoint, we provide every area, even the training and how to efficiently, bring things forward, your business growth and those outcomes. So our 30 years, we started just doing strictly cost reduction. And about 6 years into our global offerings, we decided to really evaluate what we were bringing to the table. We found in over 90% of the cases that when we were talking to the prospective client, we found that the biggest concern was that bottom line. And that could be defined ROI, profit, what the margins are, costs, and that type of thing. So we realized right away that it's important to look at your organization overall. It isn't just one area, because when you do work in one area, that affects many areas. So it's got to be brought from a holistic standpoint. So we decided, and we're going to go over that a little bit, we decided to do a no-cost assessment. And what that meant is we would review the entire organization's spend, their 12-month spend in every area, and then prioritize from really what I call lowest hanging fruit to simplest to most complex, and then prioritize that. And each year, include that as a part of your strategy. That's really important, especially as we go into this next 5 to 10 years. There's going to be major competition. There's going to be a lot of challenges. There's going to be more tariffs. There's going to be more tax and compliance. So it's going to be really important that as you fix your strategy and you set your strategy, that you look at it from a holistic standpoint. So when we go into an organization, if it's a small organization, we might discover 200 areas. If it's a large organization, it could be 1,000 to 2,000 different areas just for that organization. So it's important from a holistic standpoint, and from a global standpoint, even if you're just a local organization, it's important because the things that used to not affect you 10 years ago now affect us in major ways on a global scale. So our track record, actually, we've saved tens of billions of dollars just in procurement cost reduction. That doesn't include efficiencies. It doesn't include best practice. It doesn't include mitigation of risk. It doesn't include the different risks of supply chain disruptions and how we've helped organizations and our clients help mitigate that. So if we look at the last 31 years, we know going in that our average save is going to be, it's actually almost 29%, and that's with certain things that you do. You might only bring an increase of maybe 9%, some may be over 60%, but that's our average, is to over 28%. And we know going in with procurement cost reduction projects, so when we do a procurement cost reduction solution, we know going in over 98% of the cases we're going to help improve that bottom line. And again, please take note, it isn't just reducing that cost, it's bringing measures from warranty, RMA, to logistics, to supply chain, to risk, to vendor management, to everything that would go into a full procurement solution. So some of our strategic partnerships, we have many partners around the world, Fortunes, MNCs, different organizations. We do about 84% of all of our work in-house. The other 16% we partner with some major players, major organizations that have proprietary intellectual property driven solutions, and that covers the range from technology to inventions to VC, merger and acquisition solutions, to different things. Because remember, again, anything where money is spent, that is part of procurement. And so as you review again your strategy, as you're going into 2016 and beyond, and every year you create a cost reduction strategy from a holistic standpoint, really look at everything, because you're going to start to see procurement start becoming one of the most important arenas in an organization, because without the proper best in practice, without the proper delivered services and products, without the right human capital, yes, human resources and sourcing of human capital is a part and principle, best practice of procurement. So as you review all these strategies with the different divisions and departments in your organization and with the executive team, it's really important to look at it from every angle and design a strategy in each of those divisions and departments within the whole structure of everything. So some of our clients, we've worked with thousands of different clients, from 9 of the top 10 pharma companies in the world, from reorganizing the organizations, the ExxonMobil, Hess Energy, MetLife, State Farm and Farmers Insurance Group at PTTEP, Petronas, Petron, Vietsoft Petro, Ram Energy, to different governments like the Singapore government, Malaysian government, United Arab Emirates government, some of their divisions, as well as 21 federal agencies in the U.S. federal government, to nonprofits like the YWCA, some of the largest ones, to smaller nonprofits, not-for-profits, to private, public-held, small organizations of startups, to some of the largest in the world. So we cover, procurement covers any kind of industry. And so our background, as you look at things, it's really important in your strategy to understand that you're bringing everything from a very factual, data-driven strategy. So what we're going to share in the next slides will really outline long-term success-driven methodologies, how you review. It isn't just luck, or it isn't just, well, we just save some money. It really comes down to equations, mathematics, how you track everything, and it is even what I call software technology. One of the things we found with some of the largest companies in the world, mid-size and even small, some of the best in practice, we have found that when we've done procurement audits, we've only had a few pass our tests. We do proprietary driven procurement audits where we go into governments as well as commercial companies, and we've only had a couple pass over the last 38 years of delivering those solutions. What I want to say about that is it's really important that when you set up your system with these steps, that it's documented, it's tracked, it's traced, and what you're going to find is you're going to actually save money and be able to look at ways to even outsource others to come into your organization. More and more companies are looking at models of outsourced human capital. They have to, especially in developed countries where there's taxation and compliance and there's benefits and there's retirement. So you've got to look at everything and how your cost reduction strategies come forward. So as we go to the next slide, we're going to look at 10 steps, and obviously these are high level. When we go in, we actually have a course where we teach 3 to 5 days, sometimes 10 days, and an entire global strategy-driven session, interactive, with case studies and interactive modules, as well as real planning, real-time events within those organizational structures. So the information you get is going to give you enough to look at. This will not include all of our proprietary information, which is hundreds and hundreds of different modules, forms, templates that we utilize, but this will give you a start to look at everything. So step one, what do you do when you're looking at reducing your costs? Well, first and foremost, you need to gather information about all your budget areas. That's all goods and services identified in your organization. So when you go to your controller, you go to your CFO, or you go to your finance administration director, your finance department, and you begin to implement this, it's really important not to do it by yourself, but get your team buy-in and say, we're going to start acting proactively to deliver what we call best in practice methodologies, strategy, cost reduction, and be able to proactively forecast and what we're going to reduce costs in and deliver better best value. And best value, I'm going to tell you right now, as you're looking at this, best value is defined in everything from your mission and vision and goals in your organization, and then putting that into the finance procurement department and the shared services department, and then really honing into specifics. And we'll go into a little bit of that in a little bit. But it's important to understand best value, because if you just reduce costs, that doesn't mean you're reducing costs, because you may bring in a bid where you just saved a couple $1 million, but in warranty, maybe there's we're doing an offshore oil rig, and the different MRO that go into that, yeah, we reduce costs, but the warranty on that machinery is only good for X amount of time, whereas the second bidder had a 5-time better package and a warranty, and actually that's cheaper or less expensive and the best value of how you review and overview things. So as you go through in step 1, you're going to get all your spend areas. And depending on size of company, if we're talking about some of the larger companies in the world, we've unearthed thousands of different areas of spend. And you need to prioritize, and you need to set up an SOP or best practice. How do you prioritize? It isn't just from a procurement standpoint, it's each division, because what you have in marketing or what you have in IT or what you have in logistics or what you have in raw materials or property, the finance department, each division or department is going to have maybe a different best value identification in how you reduce costs. So you want to look at, when you get all your spend areas, you're going to look at from largest to smallest expenses, and this isn't just like monthly where you look at the areas. You're going to look at least a 12-month spend, and the most recent if you can, and you're going to go through everything and then prioritize from easiest to most complex to what's the greatest savings to what's important to what's needed in your core competencies of your organization, and there's many other areas of factoring. We might look at 100 different areas in one area because it's the most complex area. If we're looking at some companies, oil and gas or supply of energy is the most important to them. So we might look at logistics and factoring and supply chain. One of our clients in Thailand, for example, one of their biggest factoring of their areas was steel. And unfortunately, we came to them after the tsunami in Japan. That cost them over $200 million. That's part of how you analyze is supply chain disruption and how you rate your vendors. And again, you might be thinking, well, we're doing that. Well, I got to be honest, in all the audits we've done, and we've done thousands of them over the years, again, we find very few doing this and tracking. And you're going, well, why would they do that? Well, lack of not enough resources and people in the procurement and finance department, and you're going to find more companies are downsizing shared services like never before on every continent. We're seeing it left and right firsthand. Secondarily, lack of knowledge. If you look at training, $142 billion was spent in training in the U.S. alone in 2014, and the rest of the world is about $200 billion, a major increase from the previous 4 years. And it's increasing even more. Why? Because they don't teach real process methodologies in the real world. In college, in most cases, they don't teach these kind of things, and there's very few mentors and coaches that really go in and teach proven practice and bring those people up into the next generation. Next slide, step 2. You need to complete the analysis of your budget areas. So as you go through and you look at everything, so you look at with your team to ensure there's agreement. That's really important. We work with some clients where great companies, but the executive management was not in it. They didn't care. They didn't want to support it. And to be honest with you, we don't engage with clients where we don't have agreement in the team, because typically those kind of things will fall apart. So you have to have agreement, unity, buy-in, and really review the process. Once you start this and do it, year 2 and beyond becomes easier and easier. But you need to look at every area. And just some examples: finance, IT, administration, operations, HR, executive management. any other department, team, anybody involved. And then you need to categorize each area from first, second, and so forth for each area. And you're going to bundle too. One of the biggest mistakes we find in a lot of major companies, and these are first-in-class Fortunes, MNCs, major players, is they don't bundle the procurements. They have each division doing this, and then they bid out just that area, and this amount of spend is small, but if they bundled each division and department, not only do you get lower cost, but you increase quality, you increase the best value, you increase logistics, you increase supply chain, you increase better agreements, you do all kinds of things, and actually you lessen your workload with what I call supplier partnerships. Step 3, you need to define your best value. We talked about that a little bit ago. Well, what is best value? It's anything that's going to cost money, cost time, cost resources. So you need to go through and really identify and create a standard operating procedure, a best practice procedure or a process, and what that really means. Not just with the procurement department, but every division, because each division and department might have a different definition of best value. So again, as we're looking at cost reduction, it isn't just cost reduction. It's about reducing, like negotiating and improving pricing, product and service quality, delivery times, return authorization processes, invoicing. One company, one of the largest cement companies in the world, we did a bid about 14 years ago, and we did it for one of their divisions, a $12 billion division. We started in the United States, and we started with office supplies. And what we found, and this is true in most bids, and this isn't procurement's fault. Procurement doesn't have enough staff. As we go and audit staff and as we audit procurement departments around the globe, most procurement departments don't have enough people in them. So what ends up happening is they're acting reactively in a lot of cases, and they're not able to do true processes and true bidding processes and negotiations. So what happens is these things just don't happen. The NAPM and ISM, which are two main bodies globally for procurement and supply chain, they did a study of over 100,000 companies, and they found that over 98.5% of all companies from 10 million to 50 million gross revenues were not doing any bidding processes. Folks, that's not good. So what do you do in that event? Well, there's a lot of things you can do. You can outsource to a partner. You can bring somebody in with your strategy, save some money, and use that cash flow to bring in more folks. And we've done that before with a lot of companies where you create cash flow real quick and increase quality, and then that funds some of the staff to bring them on board to then do things, and then we work in coordination and joint venture with them to help them continue to drive that value and lowering of cost and improvements and actually growing their business, because that's what ends up happening. So it isn't just reducing costs. Like one of our clients, we increased their revenue stream by $142 million over a 5-year term because of some of the things we put in place, and then we did it step by step and then reorg the entire organization, and they have become one of the best nonprofits in the entire world. It only took us a little bit less than 2 years. So with this strategy, you can definitely put things in place. So as you define your best value, there could be 100+ different areas that are really important in the process, including vendor audit. And you might go, well, vendor audit, we do that. Well, what we found in most cases, and not anything with anybody, but we found in a lot of cases, vendor audit is not done. We've actually cleaned up a lot of vendor lists with some of our clients, and we found in some cases over 60% of those vendors were no longer in existence. We took one company with over 4,000 different suppliers, and we actually deleted 50% plus of all their suppliers because they were no longer in business. They hadn't done it in over 20 years. And you might go, well, gosh, I think we do that. Well, it's important to have, as part of your best value, internal audit processes. So we set up a lot of things like that. So you need to also put that in your best value determination. Step 4, team communication, absolutely vital. Did you know that over 75% of all problems worldwide in every organization, whether it's a business, a nonprofit, doesn't make any difference, wherever there's a team, is all related to either no communication, lack of communication, or misunderstandings. So it's really important when you set up team communication that you communicate with everybody involved. And it isn't good enough verbally. You need to have a process where it's written, where it's documented. And you go, man, that's more work. Yeah, it is more work, but in the end result, this will save you time and money if you set it up right. So again, best value is critical. Part of that relationship and what you do in your success, it's all about communication in your organization. If you start there, that will then go into your RFP processes. It will go into your procurement processes. It will go into your best value processes and how you set up your entire processes from your RFP processes, SOW processes, benchmarking, how you negotiate, how you analyze, and everything else that goes into your cost reduction strategy. So it's really important in your team communications that you look at, okay, we've got a team, now we're communicating, we've documented that communication. What do? Well, who's your client? Who's your customer? It's the people internally in your company. It's your divisions, your departments. It's the people who need the goods and services. So it's really important to have what I call a format that documents what they're really asking for, not just a requisition. It's really bringing down a form that where they understand and you understand it's signed off on, and we need this. And it's also important in the team communication that everybody in your organization understand what it takes to get products and services in, what it takes to do a true RFP. A true RFP can take you anywhere from 6 weeks to a year, depending on complexity. So it's really important you communicate to everybody involved in your cost reduction strategy that they understand what it's going to take so that you're proactive and that you train all your divisions and department people, anybody involved in what I call the purchase requisition and purchase order process. They need to understand your process, so you need to have a training within your team communication. So once you have this in place, you can then create the RFP scope of work letter, and really that should be a template. You should have a template involved for goods and services, products, human capital, and you'll start in general, but you'll begin to build this out over time. And as you get this done, we have several templates. We have over 5,000 different templates in our back office that we plug and play, that we've spent millions of dollars on over the years to be able to work in almost every industry around the world. So when you begin to do that, you're going to set up your own templated system, because remember, if you look at McDonald's is not that great of food. But what did they do? They changed a lot of the world and how things are done, the drive-through mentality, systems. There's a really good book called The McDonaldization of Society, and McDonald's affected the entire world and how things are processed. So it's important for you to design your system turnkey, and it's going to start with you or your team. And as you develop these different things, you're going to develop them over time. Again, you may go, gosh, we don't want to spend millions of dollars, or we don't want to spend $200,000 setting this up. You probably want to look at bringing out in experts who can help you with the process, because it will save you a lot of time and money and headaches. So begin to look at that. Team communication is really important in the process. Document everything you do. So step 5, creating your RFP scope of work letter. There, in a sense, what you're going to do is you're going to start by designing a scope RFP work letter that's going to outline your best value. So remember, we talked about best value and determining what that is. You're going to identify that and create a template that's important to you. Well, that can be delivery, cost, it can be green, sustainable measures, supply chain disruption, customer service, who's going to be involved, terms, maybe your terms are net 45 or net 60, banking, it can be different other solutions. How do you handle solutions right now in this specific area? So again, it's really, you need to design that letter, and then you can plug and play a lot of those different things from your letter, your RFP, request for proposal letter, and use that for future bidding processes. So this is one thing you're going to send out in your future bids to all your people, and you may go, well, we have a template letter, we've used it in e-procurement. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, most studies around the world have found in e-sourcing, e-procurement, that over 84% of all competitions knocked out. Why is that? Because when you're bidding, you're dealing with salespeople. And those are the people that are selling products and services and different things, even the engineers. That's their job, is to sell you. And so it's really important that you use methodologies that are easy to understand. And one of the things we do, we very rarely, unless it's complex bidding processes, we very rarely have to take calls or have in-person meetings. Now, obviously, on the more complex bidding processes and cost reduction strategies, you will have to have meetings. There's no way around that. We took, for example, a casino, one of the largest in the world. They had over 700 enterprises, and the bid was to take them paperless. This was back in 2003. This is a long time ago. It took us 1.8 years to finish it. We took them paperless. Over 100 million documents a year is what they were doing. We took it all electronic, and it was incredible. But to write that RFP and to set it up, we had to hire engineers to write that, and that was very expensive. But they save almost $20 million a year just in labor. And not to talk about documentation and efficiencies. So as you're writing your letters, obviously certain things are going to change, but for the most part, your templates are going to work and plug and play in a lot of different things and the less complex things. And what we found is in 82% of all the procurements we do, they're on the simpler side. Step 6, you're going to send information to your suppliers or vendors. That's going to include that RFP scope of work letter that initiates the bid process, and that RFP scope of work letter is going to include all your best value, and it's going to include when your first round of negotiations are due. Now, this is not an RFQ. RFQs are fine, but what we found in a lot of cases around the world, RFQs, requests for quotes, are done, and they should not be being used. They should bundle and take all of that and lock in, because when you do a bid, you're going to save a lot of time over the long haul, and you're going to save way more money. So in the RFP process, when you send that letter out, you're going to use what I call a template, and that template's going to have, you know, all the different things that you utilize in that template. So for example, let's go back to the cement company. They were bidding out over probably a 20-year period. They would go for the 300 top areas and office supplies. Well, that's a problem. That can be considered cost reduction. We're talking about true procurement cost reduction across the whole entire scope of things. So when we looked at that, we gathered all their office supply companies they were buying from. In just the United States, they were buying from 71 different office supply companies. That's a lot, folks. They weren't getting volume. They weren't getting bids. In fact, what they had done is they bidded out their 300 top core areas. Well, what about all the other areas? So we gathered all the data from the suppliers, and we created a list that was on the suppliers, and they were buying over 6,219 different specific office supply areas. We built the list. Didn't take us a lot of time because the suppliers who were supplying, we asked for SKU, manufacturer number, brand name, unit of measure, etc., and built that list. We then put that out to bid. We saved them over $27 million just in office supplies, in just the United States. We went on to save them over $250 million in less than 23 months in 51 other areas. And of course, we went on and did a lot of other work, made them a best in practice organization, and they're doing phenomenal now. So it all starts, though, with this process. Remember I said about e-procurement? A lot of e-procurement systems will knock out some great, what I call competition, because a lot of salespeople aren't going to want to go into those e-procurement systems. They're too complex in a lot of cases. Not that I'm saying they're bad, because they're not. But the reality is a lot of salespeople won't spend hours trying to figure it out and bid on it. They just don't. So this system is very simple, process-driven, it's understandable, and it gets you results, and you don't have a lot of people calling you back, asking questions and asking certain things that don't make sense. So again, in your RFP letter, it's going to define best value, it's going to define what you're bidding on, it's going to define when the first round of negotiations and documents are due, and the second round, if you go second round, third round, you might go, well, why would we do second and third rounds? Because it's human nature all around the world that companies don't give their best price in the first go-around, even the second go-around. So it's up to you and how you set up your policies, but again, you're going to want to have this in place. So here's an example master list. We were talking about how we send out for the different 71 suppliers, and they had over 6,000 different office supplies. We sent out this form to all of them to propagate in this Excel spreadsheet. You know, do things that are simple for you that are going to bring you results. So we did that. We built the list, and that's what we sent out in the bid process. Of course, we did not include pricing. We don't ever include pricing. And then as we got this list of over 6,000 different office supply line items back, we can drop and drag, compare, and in the final 3, we can look at not only cost, but we can look at that RFP scope of work letter and the responses in the Word document that's converted into a PDF. We can look at step 1. Well, the first best value is cost. Step 2, delivery. Tell us about your delivery, because I'm going to tell you right now, delivery is a part of best value because over 44% of companies worldwide have a problem getting their products and services delivered on time. That affects your profit margin. That affects your core competencies. So again, when we get back the RFPs from the different suppliers, we can then drop and drag and compare without receiving lots of notebooks and paper and all that. It's all electronic. So we cost compare all the pricing across the board, and then we're able to drop and drag for each item plus each category for total spend as well, and look at percentages like even down to pencils and pens. And then when we bid this out, guess what we do in best value? With this specific client, we were able to centralize everything from a global basis, and the entire department from an electronic standpoint, and this was like 13 years ago, they could then approve or not approve in one location real time. So that was part of the bid. We want a back-end system that coordinates with our procurement and finance packages that can go in with our PO, etc. And also another thing that talks about cost reduction when you're looking at best value, people spend less time having to order. They also stick with what's approved. And if it's not approved, they have to get authorization electronically. And so this keeps people in, and we also found it's human nature for people to buy more expensive things. This also, people think, well, gosh, we have somebody that looks at office supplies and other things on a daily basis. Do you know how much time and money that costs? As you put this in, this is a proven fact, and we're not even talking group buying here, because every bid we've ever done against group buying, we've always won. Even the GSA of the federal government, we've always won every single bid against the GSA and every government entity. So this information works. As we go into the next step, you're looking at the bid proposal, receipt, and evaluation. As those suppliers send back their list, obviously, of their pricing in that spreadsheet, as well as answering every question in your RFP scope of work letter, so you can compare along with any other documents that go along with your bidding processes. And each government, each country, each province, each state is different. So you may, like in the United States, we would send out a W-9 because we want to know, are they a true blue entity by the IRS with a federal employee identification number, and that's a law in a lot of states to have that. In Malaysia, they have different rulings. So again, you'll send out your certain forms that go along with them for them to sign off, collusion forms, your reference forms, etc. But you'll send this out electronic, you'll get it back, and this process works very, very, very effectively. Step 8, what we do then is we select a winning vendor. So you'll select the finalists, you'll notify the winner in writing, and keep in mind, because you're getting everything electronically, you're keeping everything saved, not only in your shared service, your shared services drive, not only on your computer, but also in your backup systems for disaster recovery. So now you have a trail for audit, because if it's not in the folder, it never happened. So everything we do in this process is documented, audited, even our communications, as you keep track of communications. And you may say, well, gosh, I have it in email format. Well, we've known clients where their email servers went down and they lost all the data. So you need to keep backups as well. So when you select the winning vendor, it isn't just in cost. So you may, like the office supplies for this company, we didn't select the #1 company for cost. We selected number 3. Why did we do that? Well, the first company, they were all within about $500,000 save. The third company we picked had better back-end systems, they had a better best value, they had better training modules, they had a better warranty, they had 24-hour delivery guaranteed anywhere within North America, and they had a bunch of other things where they actually had better ratings. So every single area in that RFP scope of work letter, you're going to assign a number to it. So let's say you get down to the final 3. Like we started with the office supply company, we started with 71. We got down to a final 3 after 3 rounds of negotiations. So what we did is we took the RFP scope of work letter, and there was over, I believe, 75 different areas. So what we did is we rated each area. So based on the RFP scope of work outline that we got back from them, we rated it was either a 1, a 2, or a 3. So on pricing, that's obvious. They were the least expensive, so they got a 1. They were next, they got a number 2. And the third finalist got a number 3. And then on warranty, we looked at that and we identified there were 1, 2, or 3. Then we looked at logistics, and then we looked at shipping. We looked at 24-hour delivery. We looked at current solutions, future solutions. We looked at all the different things. Do they have their own trucks, or do they outsource all their delivery? We looked at all kinds of different things. At the end of the day, out of all those 75 areas, they will either have 1, 2, or 3, and then we calculate those numbers. So it's not just guesswork. So the whole bidding team, depending on complexity, because the simpler ones, obviously the procurement department does it, but the more complex ones, you're going to have probably your controller and your CFO involved. You're going to have your COO. You're going to have your head of IT or CIO. You're going to have different people involved, like the company we took paperless. We had over 17 people on the bid team. So everybody voted. At the end of the day, we had a numeric equation on who the winning vendor supplier was, and we created that. So that's where you'll select, and you'll authorize and document that. Number 9, you'll sign the contract, and then you begin the implementation process. And that's a whole different area depending on where your organization is at. Some implementations are easier, some are harder. But that's where it comes with best practice, and you got to start somewhere. With another client of ours, we had come to them. They had lost over $1 billion the previous year because of major risk. And they had a lot of problems. We had to start in one little region. We got some wins that gained some momentum. We got other regional presidents involved, which got other divisions involved, and then that became a best in practice place. But before we came in, they were definitely fear-based, and there was a lot of problems. So we created a team through the performance. So depending on where your clients are at, where you're at, again, you got to start sometimes small. So step number 9 is you look through, you can kind of see old versus new on this next slide. You'll see on all those areas. This is a different client, very small client. We actually saved them $311,000 in office supplies for a 2-year contract term, just for office supplies. We took that money, we hired them a director of purchasing, hired 2 new buyers. They were going to actually fire several people. We were able to stop that, went on to did a second project. We were able to bring in some things. We actually won them tens of millions of dollars in new business because of cash flow, and we reorged the whole company. It was a phenomenal thing, and this company now is doing phenomenal. They're one of the best in their industry, and they've grown tremendously in the last several years. So as you see this slide, you'll see where it all starts. Your previous price versus new contract price. Broken down, obviously, this was hundreds and hundreds of pages in length, but you'll see even this small company had over almost 1,500 different specific office supply line items. So this is the difference between cost reduction and procurement cost reduction. You truly benchmark in every single area, and you don't have to do the work. You put your suppliers to do the work, because we also find another thing when you do this type of thing and you allow your suppliers to do this. What we found is that the suppliers actually have more real data than the actual client. And you go, well, how can that be? Because remember, we talked about shared services, finance, procurement, and other departments and shared services downsizing. It's happening so fast around the globe, and that's going to be something that's going to stay for quite some time in this generation anyways. So more people are doing things with less. So your supplier, what we found is, even the office supplies in most cases, we'll find the suppliers have more real spend data. So we will take a range. So from the finance department, they'll say we're spending in office supplies $500,000. The suppliers will probably say we're spending around $700,000 a year, just because things get coded sometimes wrong within organizations. So again, we're taking every bit within this bid and being very specific, even down to each line item, even down to tissue and toilet paper, and down to pencils and pens and toner, paper, copiers, furniture, anything supply, office supply, and related and furniture related, anything that can fit within that. We do the same thing in janitorial. Every single area we do this in. Obviously, you may have, like we did, a bid for a major chemical company, and it was for explosives and for chemicals and different things. And obviously, I believe there was probably 9 line items that we only had to deal with, but it was even more complex because there's all kinds of regulation that go along with that. So again, it's very simple. Step 10, you implement it, and then you go on to next projects. And then you're able to really centralize, and you're able to reduce costs. And we've done this with every single engaged client in procurement cost reduction that we've ever had. When I say engaged, I mean there's a team-oriented atmosphere. Say, you know, gosh, we really want to save money. You'd be surprised. I mean, we had one large manufacturer that does about $30 billion a year, and they sabotage themselves. I think that company is either going to go bankrupt or they're going to be bought out by an international conglomerate because they don't want any help. They don't want to operate in team environments. So very simple. If we're looking at what I call the procurement cost reduction summary, many companies conduct what we call cost reduction, where they really sign an agreement for a specified percentage. That's not true procurement cost reduction. It's really about identifying, benchmarking, your best value, your scope of work. It's really bringing it all together and then being able to go into every area within that bid and really bring it into a real procurement cost reduction strategy. So when we talk about this, it isn't just doing contract negotiation. It's about identifying efficiencies. Like we started this with a nonprofit, one of the largest in the United States, and we found they were doing 27 touches on the requisition process. We reduced that to 7 and actually increased their efficiencies, reduced their costs. So we did that with the same process. So there's a lot of things that go into procurement cost reduction. So really the bottom line really is there's many things, oh my gosh, we could go into that would, you know, we have several days worth of training and modules, and that, you know, that comes in a different way, in a different process. But if you're looking at just cost reduction, then you might get some save, and that's great. But again, you want to look at time, labor, you want to look at your relationships. If you look at the best in practice organizations around the world, what are they doing different? You look at Google, you look at Starbucks, you look at some of their organizations, they understand supplier relationship. It doesn't mean they don't go through the entire best in practice and compliant driven procurements. But what it means is they create partnerships, and that makes a huge difference. So in this procurement cost reduction we just talked about, you can create those long, sustainable partnerships that not only reduce costs, but create better growth and best in value. So you're not only doing that, you're looking at compliance, returns, you're looking at customer service, you're looking at staff knowing how to order, you're looking at control mechanisms and how things are ordered through cost control, invoicing, as well as reducing and eliminating what I call emergency purchasing. So many organizations, not to fault their own, but they don't have what I call turnkey systems set up in place. Too many emergency procurements take place. Also compliance. Compliance is going to begin to increase and intensify. It's already happening in the procurement space in shared services like we've never seen before. So when you set up a system like this, your compliance, you'll become way better. You'll have what I call documented in the folder, whether it's electronic or it's in the folder or both, systems. You'll be able to measure performance. Also, vendor management's very important. Relationship development. I will tell you this. We do supply chain disruption audits around the globe, and we found very few compliant. In fact, 82% of American companies are at risk of supply chain right now. And so in some other countries, it's even worse than that. So there's a lot that goes into you, not only just reducing costs, you are preparing yourself to be a proactive company. So when we're looking at affected areas, I mean, begin to look at this is just a sampling. It can affect hundreds of areas through setting up a process like this. And again, you might be thinking, well, I think we have that in procurement. We found in a lot of cases it's not in procurement. And again, not the fault of procurement. This takes time to set up and to do it right. If done right with these steps and with all the things that go along with it, oh my gosh, it will change the entire organization and make it a place where people will stand in line to want to work for. So with that said, I think at this time it'd be great to take any questions. I'm going to hand it back to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ted, for a very interesting presentation. Folks, we are open for the question and answers. You can either put your question in the chat box or you can raise the hand icon available on your webinar console. Let me go straight to the first question we have. This is from Abdullah. Mr. Abdullah. Mr. Abdullah, I am unmuting you and you can ask the question directly from Mr. Ted. Please go ahead, Mr. Abdullah.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you can share the presentation with us for learning. So wasn't able to hear it all, so I wasn't sure if they can share it with me, or is it hard to be shared?
Mr. Abdullah, you have to be a bit louder. We cannot hear you clearly.
Actually, I think, Abdullah, I think you were saying that you wanted to share the presentation because you came on a little late. Yes, actually, the presentation will be shared, you know, after the call here.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. The next question we have from Mr. Ahmed, that is, we seem to always fail to streamline the process. Any comments on how we can do that?
So he's saying to streamline the process?
We seem to always fail to streamline the process. Any comments on how we can do that?
Well, I think most importantly, I would need to know more specifics about how you're trying to streamline, because you may have, for example, a great procurement department and you have it all together, whereas finance maybe doesn't have it together. And what I find in a lot of cases, I can trace problems and situations internally back to not developing a team. Maybe you've developed a team, but where you truly all sit down, and one of the things that we've done many times, we've actually done many trainings where we take major companies, we do 3 to 5 day trainings where we bring in finance, property, logistics, procurement, compliance, audit, etc. We bring them all together and we go through best in practice procurement. We then talk about it, and then we get involved with rewriting best practice and SOPs, standard operating procedures. And then what that does is it creates buy-in to take ownership. And we can trace back a lot of problems where the team really isn't communicating. Well, we're the finance department, you're the procurement department, you're the property department, you're the logistics department, and they all work within their own department, but they're not communicating together. So I would recommend more team orientation and start to do a weekly meeting. We actually took a very, very large company, and we actually had to sit down and teach them how to do meetings. We teach on communications and meetings. We sat down, we took lower level, mid-management, executive, we brought them all together, and we began to teach, and I'm telling you, from those presentations and those meetings that we actually facilitated, that began to drive because people felt like they made a difference in the organization, and they started to communicate across departmental. That big created ideas. It broke down the fear situations taking place. But again, I would have to know specifics because it could be many, many different things, but I would have to know more about what you've tried and where you're at within the functions. But typically, it usually comes down to team communication within different departments.
We have another question from Mr. Ahmed Karatli. He has also asked, how can we make our procurement department a profit center?
Great question. Well, first off, I would recommend creating what I call a procurement business plan. So you're going to look at what is the mission statement of your procurement department. Do you have one? And most, I will say this, most procurement departments around the world don't have one. So you're going to write everything down with your team. Include your team in this. It's always important to get buy-in from your team. So let's say you have 20 people in your procurement department, or 10 or 50 or whatever it is, and then begin to say, okay, where are we at now? Where do we want to go? What is our spend management? So we have responsibility for 200 million spend, whatever it is. So you need to write down your financial goals, your team goals. What is the mission and vision and goals of the entire organization, and mirror the procurement department according to that. What is the best value? Write all that down. Write down your forecast. What do you want to do next year? Because I will tell you, most procurement departments around the world are based on kind of a salary. You might get a bonus. If I had my druthers, like what we do, I would do it on a percentage basis, performance. You may not be able to do that according to some of the rules and regulations within your organization or country, but the reality is, at the end of the day, we do things where it's no cost, no risk. We do it all. And so we don't get paid unless we perform. And so we put it all on there and we do everything. So it's really about maximizing within your business, your procurement business plan and goal plan for your department within the entire organization. What do you want to accomplish? Because your customers are the different divisions and departments in the organization, and your suppliers, and your people, and your team. So what do they want? What are their problems? What are their pains and challenges? Identify that, and then come up with a solution about how you're going to do that. Also within the financial part, how are you going to go into food and beverage and IT and finance and HR and come up with each different department and what you're going to do for them, and then come down to, as you have your procurement cost reduction plan in place, go to your boss, go, whether it's your CFO or CEO or whoever it is, say, this is what we would like to accomplish. And you may have to write this plan on the side on your own time. But the reality is, when we've helped organizations do this, what happens in a lot of cases is that procurement department becomes a profit center. They're able to save way more money. People get more bonuses and get higher pay raises within that department. And then procurement becomes, because most companies around the world look at procurement, they don't even know what procurement means. They don't know what you're about. They don't know that you're there to serve them. So you have to come from a servant leader standpoint and say, we want to make you shine. How are you going to do that? Well, help them to not only stay within their budget, but do better. Because guess what? In a lot of companies, if they improve it's not, again, just about the dollar and how much you reduce that cost on. It's about efficiencies and how you're serving. So you want to come up with that plan and then get buy-in from your team and then from your boss, and then roll it out. And then what you do then is you change it from procurement just taking orders and doing PRs and POs and just reducing costs. You take it into a cash flow mechanism, because the credit crisis that's coming, that's going to hit in the next 6 months to a year, is going to be pretty severe. What does that mean? It means that companies are going to have to cash flow themselves more than ever before. So you need to come up with definitions, an idea where you want to take things, and look at some case studies. I'm not going to give away companies, but go even Google it. Go to Google and say, okay, best in practice procurement departments, profit center procurement departments, and you'll find some companies out there, I know several, that have put procurement right in the middle of the organization as one of the most important drivers of that whole organization. So I hope that answers your question. Next question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ted. We have another one from Mr. Abdul Ali. The question is, in most cases, reduction programs don't address the true drivers of cost or are simply too difficult to maintain over time. What are your views on it?
You're right, but here's what we do. Within the plan I just talked about, your procurement business plan, your procurement department plan for the entire department and organization, we have a whole different training. We actually do a 2-day training just on cost reduction, on the sense of all the formulas. There's multiple formulas and KPIs. What we find with most organizations is they do KPI systems and metrics and measure, but it's only a report card and they really don't use it. And it isn't just for procurement, it's all departments. So we actually teach on KPIs, metrics, how to measure it. And what we do in the plan is this. We actually drive cash flow. So for example, BP Oil, you think they're a good company. How about ExxonMobil? Are they a good company? How about Fluor Corporation? Are they a good company? I mean, we could mention hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of major companies we work with. They're all good companies. But the reality, again, is you're going to look at really bottom line two things. They either don't have enough people to do all this work, or they don't have the skill set or the knowledge base, or both. And so how do we do that? You set up in your plan to cash flow to then hire an analyst who can track this. Because at the end of the day, if you're not tracking it, what good is it? Also in your procurements, like for example those office supplies, because we put into the bid process that it can only be ordered online by all people globally and in the different continents, we're able to measure and track within seconds real pricing. So we didn't have to spend massive hours auditing invoices and finance auditing. Are we getting the pricing we agreed to in the contract and the final bid? So there's a lot of ways you can automate that. So again, to drive measurement, it's going to take somebody to measure it or technology to measure it. That costs money. To cost money, it means you need to put in your plan that as we reduce costs, we'd like to take 10% and bring in finance procurement joint deal. We want an analyst and we want a KPI manager. We want a vendor manager who manages the vendor list, for supply chain disruption, etc. So you've got to somehow do that, or you outsource it. More and more companies are outsourcing like never before, and you're going to see it increase like crazy. It just is. So I hope that answers your question. It's part of the plan and how you develop that.
Thank you, Mr. Ted. We have another question from Mr. Ahmed Karatli. What's the worst that can happen to a procurement department?
The worst that can happen is, well, first off, if the procurement department goes in, this is what I think is worse. I've seen certain clients where they're working in an organization, and I'm going to list several. I can't pick one, but maybe the top few. I would say first that comes to my mind is upper management really doesn't care. They don't care about procurement, and procurement does a great job, but they just don't care, and so they just still keep it within what I call that reactive mode. It's fear-based organization. They're not willing to grow the organization into a team environment, and so procurement stays where procurement's at, which is an order-taking type of organization. So what does that mean? Well, there's proven studies. It either means that they stay within the organization and they become like the people there, or they eventually leave to go to another organization where it's best in practice. I have to say secondary, one of the big problems is this. Believe it or not, we were doing working with a client out of Kuala Lumpur. Same thing happened for one of the largest governments in the world. We were training one of their heads of the government division. They were responsible for over 100 billion spend a year, and they did a big wrong. They didn't document it. They didn't have a procurement process in place. Didn't understand it. They went to bid and they lost over $121 million because they did it all wrong. Had to redo it. There were some lawsuits, stuff like that. So it's really important you have a process in place. Again, are experts worth their weight in gold? Oh yeah, you get what you pay for. You can be cheap, but you'll get what you pay for, or you can pay some of the best and you'll actually save money. So you got to be real careful who's in your team, that they have real understanding. Another problem in a procurement department is most procurement departments don't have a supply chain disruption standard operating procedure. So they don't categorize all their suppliers and vendors to say who's the highest risk. We do a risk categorization management system of what we call 5. That means they are key and core to the core competencies of what you do in your organization. So if you're in oil and gas and you build rigs, steel is going to be really important. If you don't have a backup, and believe me folks, please hear me, a lot of companies don't have a supply chain disruption plan. That can be a big problem. If you remember Ericsson and Nokia, back many, many years ago, a plant burnt down, and that's where they were getting most of their chips within their cell phones. One had a supply chain disruption plan, the other didn't. They lost $400 million in their first month. So supply chain disruption does fall under procurement. The other thing I would say is compliance. Because I have personally developed and authored what I call CPSR. The federal government follows some of the rules and regulations I've put in place for federal contractors and government agencies in doing business with the U.S. federal government. I've set this in place with other governments. Very important to have audits, procurement audits. And again, we teach even on procurement audits. We have 2, 3, 5-day trainings on that. We just did one in Dubai about 4 months ago, and trust me, it's not just procurement people. Compliance and regulation is going to intensify, and procurement and shared services is going to come under more what I call process audits, not finance audits, process audits. In fact, the CEO of one of the largest hospital chains owned by a government, and I can't tell where, but he said, you know what? All the consultancies come in, their focus is finance audit. They don't touch on process audit. Well, that's where most of the problems start, is in process. So those are just a few of the areas. There could be a lot more, and I could share more, but we could talk for hours on that, so I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Ted. We have another one from Mr. Ahmed Gratli. That is, what has been the hardest lesson you have learned in procurement and in the 10 steps?
Well, I would say the hardest lesson is, what client do I take on? In other words, if I'm looking at client, that would be, let's say I take on a Fortune 500. Are they a team player? And if not, I've got to nicely say, you know, gosh, this isn't going to work out. We work in team coordination, and so what I've learned over the years, 38 years of doing this, and we continue to grow all over the world. We're in 55 nations with feet on the ground. The number one thing is working with integrity and character and honesty. You know, we have looked at certain areas going into, but there's too much fraud, so we don't touch it because it means that we could be involved within that lawsuit. In fact, I read a report in 2 continents that there's still 95% fraud, and it kind of blew my mind, to be honest with you. It's like, wow. So I have to say integrity of the person and the organization, working together as a team. And when you talk about clients, if I'm talking about clients, what you need to look at is who are your clients? Define that in your business procurement plan or your divisional plan or wherever you're at. And I'd also say this. The other thing would be educating people about what procurement really is. A lot of people, when you tally and survey people, I would say literally 99.9% of all the people, they think procurement is just taking orders, requisitions, and doing purchase orders just to get their goods and services in. I'm telling you, procurement is so far beyond that. And even like when SAP bought out Reva, they ended up firing all their procurement experts, and they went to group buying. Group buying is good for certain things, but I'm going to tell you again, it's really about the person. Yes, you can automate. I would say another thing is a lot of companies automate with software, and they spend millions. We ran into one of the largest pharma companies in the world. We were the last of 3, and we basically walked away because they weren't going to survey all their locations on every continent. And you've got to do that. What are the needs? What are the processes? You've got to involve people. They ended up blowing about $15 million with the company they went with, and they ended up firing the entire department in this pharma company. And it set them back a couple of years. And this was a vendor management system. So it's really important, communication and teaching and training people what is true procurement. I would have to say the next thing that what I've learned is most people set up best practice or SOPs and they collect dust. We just redid a global purchasing manual that's over 1,000 pages in length. It hadn't been redone in 17 years, and we actually found another company's name in there in different places. They had actually copy and pasted. You might go, oh, I can't believe that. It happens a lot more than you think. So it's really important to have people sign off as well that they understand what procurement is. Anybody involved in the requisition purchase order process, training is important. And it isn't just taking a test, but understanding what does procurement do? What does it mean to affect their job? And I've seen really, really good companies, and I've watched many companies over my entrepreneurial life since I was 8 years old be huge companies and no longer cease to exist. Why did they go out of business? What happened? You can trace a lot of it back to communications, documented communications, and the process of keeping people together in a team environment. So those are just a few things.
Thank you, Ted.
Yes.
We are really pressed in time, but we will take one last question. And the question is, comment, agree we found a lot of corruption within the procurement department. How do you deal with that?
I'll say this from my experience, as we've audited thousands of people and companies over a long period of time. First off, we go in and I'll give it a real life example. We had one of the chief people give us a call. This is a client about 10 years ago. They were a global company, a government contractor, a city contractor, a state contractor, a provincial, a grant, commercial. They were involved in every kind of model you can imagine. They asked us to do an audit. They said we were having some problems. So we went in and did our process audit. And when we do a procurement audit, we just don't go into procurement. We look at everything that's involved. We interview. We go through different processes. We look at everybody involved in the request process on up to executive management. We interview. We go through every folder, subcontracts, MOUs, BPAs, BPOs. We look at contracts from before. We look at all data. We go through the SOPs, best practices, previous audits. I mean, we go through the entire thing. So this audit we did, And it all started from the top. And we went through and we found many, 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 many things that were quite frightening. And when you mess with government funds and grant funds on a global basis, that's a problem. People go to jail when you talk about that kind of stuff. So we did that. We found the findings, and then we had a brief out. We said, you know, here's all the findings. We did a report. Whenever we do an audit, we do a brief out, and then we coordinate with the people. You know, here's what happened. Here's what we saw preliminary, and then we provide a report that's very detailed. And then we set up, you know, we can help you with these. We have to get buy-in. If there's no buy-in at the upper level, there's nothing you can really do unless it's unless your government's involved, and then we can escalate. And we've done that before. People have gone to prison and served time when we audited one of our clients, and we actually took them on and cleaned them up through the entire process. That cleanup took about almost 2 years. They are now a best in practice global company. It was really neat to see them engage and do the right things. So through that audit, we then came up with findings, did the report. We then talked to those involved at the upper place, and we said, listen, here's where you're bleeding, here's what's happening, here's the reality. We then set things in motion, we got buy-in, and then we set up structures and teams, because we have thousands of people in our organization that fit in with different areas, from TQM to Lean to ISO certifications to audits to finance to supply chain disruption to, you know, have people who are some of the who's who all around the world on every continent. So we implemented our team, and this involved many locations, and we started working. We started building team. We started building help, and through that process of audit with the solutions and starting small, we added to those performances, we cleaned up, rewrote a lot of the best practices and SOPs, re-educated people, set up new programs to, you know, teach people about what it meant, have them sign off. Now they have, every 6 months, each person has to sign off on the SOP and understand what it says, take a test. We also help them set up an internal best practices audit process. And again, we just don't go into procurement, we go into logistics, we go into property, we go into finance, we go into even IT. We look at everything where procurement has a touch, and depending on what it is. And so that, you know, within a willing upper management, anything can happen to turn that company and that organization around to make it incredible. And you know what ends up happening at the end of the day? The best in practice suppliers end up coming. They want to do business with you because they find out, I've heard about this company. This is a great company. Everything's above board. It's transparent. And people, I mean, it brings a snowball effect where people begin, you know, why would 2 million plus people stand in line to work at Google without pay? Why is that? What about Starbucks? Why do a lot of people stand in line to want to work there? I mean, you just, you know, that's what happens. And so I hope I've answered your question.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ted. This really brings us towards the end of the webinar. We still have a few more questions, but we request you may directly reach Mr. Ted Landgraf on the contact addresses illustrated on his screen. Any concluding remarks from your side, Mr. Ted, before we dismiss this session?
I just want to say it's a pleasure and an honor to serve anyone, and if I can be of service to anyone, please let us know. You know, we have feet on the ground in the GCC as well, and you know, again, if there's anything I can do to be of service, I can also introduce you to some of our presidents within different things. And again, a pleasure. I look forward to serving and helping in any way as we develop great relationships for the long term. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Once again, I really want to thank you, Mr. Ted, on behalf of Gulf Business Network and Training Centers for your valuable time and sharing valuable information with us. And thank you all of those who have attended this webinar. With that, I would like to end the webinar, and you all will be automatically dismissed once this session ends. Thank you very much, and you all have a good day. Bye-bye. Take care.